Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Ishan Kulkarni to our BME Industry Insider. We're going to have a brief presentation by Mr. Kulkarni, followed by questions and answers from the panel or from the audience. So I will give a brief bio sketch of Mr. Kulkarni and then let him take it away with his presentation about his experiences. Mr. Kulkarni graduated from the University of Florida with a BS in Chemical Engineering in 2012 and a Master's in Biomedical Engineering in 2016. In between those two degrees, he successfully co-founded a multi-million-dollar company focused on digitizing the bar restaurant industry. He went on to work as a product manager at both Samsung Next and at his current role at Verizon Media in Silicon Valley. He is passionate about solving problems at scale by combining an engineering mindset with business and startup acumen to ultimately help humanity progress. He's currently working on an early-stage COVID-related startup focused on contact tracing. Mr. Kulkarni has a diverse set of experiences in industry, including successful roles in entrepreneurial endeavors. We are excited to gain insights from one of our own BME alumni on some of the traits and skills it takes to build a company from the ground up. Mr. Kulkarni will also share his expertise on the industry landscape for biomedical engineers, including his knowledge of opportunities that may not get mainstream exposure. So with that, I won't take any more of your time. Thank you very much, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Otto. Hey everyone, my name is Ishan. So to start off, first I just wanted to quickly thank the University of Florida for inviting me to speak. To think that I get to share my experiences and insights and hopefully help in a university where I learned so much and gained so much is very humbling, and it is really an honor. So thank you for that. Second of all, Dr. Otto, definitely wanted to thank you for moderating this. It's really nice to see you again. And last but not least, thank you to everybody that is listening. I appreciate you taking the time out. Obviously, 15, 20 minutes that I have is not nearly enough time to go through everything, even in any kind of detail about starting a business. So I tried to figure out a way to give just kind of anecdotal insights about the process. And of course, I'll be happy to answer any or all questions that you might have in the question and answer portion. So I don't want to take too much time just explaining, so I guess I'll get right into it. It's always a little strange to be asked to do things like this, especially in front of a group of people that I can't even see. But I remember when I was in undergrad and I was going to seminars such as these, I would frequently get to listen to seminars from VPs or CEOs of very large companies in some engineering field, and they'd have decades of experience getting really good at what they've done, and they offered some really amazing insight. But as a student, that just felt very far removed for me. You know, I never really knew what I wanted to do, which is probably a strange sentiment to have when you're in your last year of engineering, still not really being sure if that's where you wanted to go. But all I knew was that I just wanted to work on interesting problems with equally interesting people. And if you ask me even now, that's still my answer, and that's the answer I give in all my current interviews. So that hasn't changed. But hearing about all these things and getting insights about how to become luminaries in that field, it just seemed kind of like a black box for me, going from being a student to having a job, let alone starting a company. And so I guess there just seemed like no real easy path forward in order to go from step one to step two. And that's kind of what I wanted to focus on when I was talking about this, which was demystifying and maybe humanizing a little bit the process of starting a company, and really showing how spur of the moment and fortuitous it was when you see somebody like me sitting here in front of you saying, I successfully started a multi-million-dollar company. It's very easy to think that, wow, he knew what he was doing. But you have to understand that you're looking at the end result and we're looking back. You know, it makes people feel like I knew what I was doing. Again, that is very much not the case, especially if it's your first time going around. So like I said, I wanted to just kind of, hopefully, instead of giving like a boring lecture of just like, here's a framework, 1, 2, 3, 4, just humanizing it and showing exactly how I went about it, so that you will see that this was just more of trying things and not giving up and trying to minimize your risk. So with that, I'll end with a framework at the end and kind of summarize those points about how you can use that, whether you're starting a company or going into industry or just trying to live life in a little bit more full and free way. So I'll get started. A few months before I graduated in 2012 with my degree in chemical engineering, I started a company called Bartender. And so this was, to give you an idea of how just kind of fortuitous this was, I was taking an innovation class and the teacher told me to go to a hackathon. It was 3-day startup. I actually met my founding team the day we started our company. And so I went there. It was all over a weekend. For those that aren't familiar, it's a 3-day startup or startup weekend, or these kind of 3-day hackathons where on Friday you show up and mingle with a bunch of people that just want to start a company. They're usually strangers. You break into teams and ideate all of Friday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you get locked into the building, code, build, develop, and Sunday you just give this kind of skeleton product that you present to judges for feedback. And I chose to go to that instead of the club party that I was otherwise going to go to, and just try to see what would happen. So on Friday, we actually couldn't come up with anything. The team that ended up being my co-founding team. And so a person on the team actually just suggested, hey, why don't we blow the coop on this whole thing and just go drink in Midtown? I mean, that sounded like a Friday to me, you know? So that's what we ended up doing. We actually left the competition. And through the course of the night, we were having a good time, and it turns out that one of the people on our team was very smitten with one of the bartenders that worked at the bar that we were at. And, you know, it's in true Gainesville spirit, we had already made plans for an after party even before we left the hackathon, because the party never ends in the swamp. And so we had all the plans in place. Everybody was a friend of a friend, and so we just kind of invited the whole group out. And they told us that they couldn't join us, even though they'd love to, because they had to do inventory that night. And so we said, well, you know, you have the address, we'll get the party started, just join up whenever you're done. How long does it take? Half an hour? And that's when they told us that they'd probably be there till about 10 in the morning. And it was like 1:30 at night, for context. And so that was really shocking to us. We called a team meeting and said, guys, it seems there's a problem in the industry. And so we looked into it, and it turns out there actually is a massive problem. Right now, inventory is a paper and pen process. And so because of that, if you're a manager or owner, you have to go do inventory by manually putting in how much is in each bottle on a piece of paper, manually adding together all the same bottles and putting it into Excel in order to even know what you have, what you're running low on, and to generate purchase orders. And because that process is so time consuming, nobody ends up doing it, right? It takes anywhere from 6 hours to multiple weeks based on the establishments that we've spoken to and the clients that we got. And so nobody does it. And because of that, the US loses over $30 billion a year to lost liquor alone. And that was insane to us. The shrinkage rate, which is the amount that gets lost due to bottles breaking, people overpouring, people stealing, bottles never showing up, all of that stuff, which is called the shrinkage, was over 26% on average in the industry. So that meant over 1 in 4 drinks were walking out the door, and bars and restaurants had no idea where that was going. Now, it's pretty obvious that that's where they make most of their money. And so that was causing something like 88 to 92% of bars and restaurants to fail within the first 2 to 3 years. And so the entire team was actually all engineers, either computer science or other kinds of engineers, such as myself. And so we all thought, you know, there's got to be an easier way to do this. And the entire premise was you should be able to do inventory in 15 minutes or less with all the technology that we have. And that's kind of how Bartender was born. So I just wanted to kind of give a few quick highlights about that. Now we have over 25,000 subscription clients worldwide, and we're still growing. We've been featured on a reality TV show, so Bar Rescue on Spike TV with John Taffer. We have small to all enterprise customers, including theme parks, airline companies, stadiums, so on and so forth. My team has been out partying with like Cascade and Tiesto and things like that in Vegas. The founding team still sends me, before this COVID stuff, they used to send me videos of them karaokeing with John Legend. So it kind of just blew up from something that we just started because we saw an interesting problem to this whole thing. And so to quickly walk through a little bit of what the application looks like, you can build your bar exactly the way you see it. So you can have like the deck bar, main bar, things like that. And each bar that you click, you can see every single bottle or libation in the order that you have them. And then at the right, you can see, like, you can keep a count and inventory of exactly how much you want. And if it's a bottle that fills up, you can tap to the liquor level and swipe to the next one. And so this is kind of some of the UI that we ended up making. So all of this allowed us to generate reports where you could inventory and reorder, and you could also look into exactly like an analytics dashboard and generate data about your establishment. And so obviously this kind of took the industry by storm, but I wanted to focus on what we did in order to become successful. So it would require us backing up to before I had any of this, right? We just had an idea. It seemed we had found a problem that was endemic to an entire industry. But how did you translate that and make sure that what you were building was actually good? So of course we were just taking stabs in the dark back then, but it turns out what we ended up doing was actually pretty important. So first of all, we reached out to about 600 to 800 bars and restaurants. Just went down the list, grabbed phone numbers, and talked to anybody who was willing to talk. We asked them a bunch of questions about just how their day is, because you have to first learn about the industry. And we had no background in the space. And so we didn't say anything about our idea. We didn't say anything about what we're trying to build. The whole point was to understand their pain points. So instead of saying, hey, would you like X, Y, and Z solution to help you do inventory better? Everybody's always going to say yes. It's very important to just have that organically be the takeaway of the conversation that yes, they need a solution. So instead a question would be like, how do you do inventory? How often do you do inventory? Walk me through your day. Things of that nature. And so after that, we had hundreds of testimonials from people talking about what they did in their bar, how they did it. And we had identified all the people that were involved in a product such as this. So the bar owner, the bar manager, the bar backs, the bartenders, and we talked to hundreds of each of those. And because of that, we were able to kind of compile and put together this idea for these seem to be the common pain points across these individuals, which feeds into the potential feature set of the product. And so once we had a set of potential features, we were still figuring it out as we went, and we put those features together and made a minimum viable product, which is the least amount of features that are needed in order to actually ship a product that somebody might be able to pay for. So end-to-end usability with no frills. And we called that the alpha version of our alpha. And once we had that, this was summertime right after I had graduated, I went to every single bar in Midtown and downtown Gainesville. And to whoever was willing to listen, I would just show up, knock on their door and say, hey, you don't know me. I'm Ishan. I'll do inventory for your bar for free every single night if you just let me poke around in the back with bottles. And a lot of conversations were like, dude, who the hell are you? Why would I do that? But there are some people that are like, for free. Okay, sure, why not? And so it was something around 13 bars, and I would go every single day or stagger it however it worked out and do inventory with the application that we had built. And I mean, I got to tell you, I lost a couple of years of my life doing that, just because I was like crawling over tomato boxes in the dark, fighting off cockroaches. The application was so buggy, it would just crash and I would lose all my work. And it was soul crushing. But that's honestly, I think, one of the biggest reasons that we were able to sidestep so much of the risk that's endemic to starting a business, because I actually went and put myself in the end user's shoes, the customer's shoes, and tried to figure out exactly how it would be to walk a mile in their pair, literally. And so because of that, I was able to come back to the developers who were all rock stars in their own right. They were very enamored with the newest technologies. They wanted to do computer vision, so you could just mount, like, take your camera and sweep it over the bar, and it would be able to detect all the liquor levels. But I was able, and so we had that kind of set up as this is what we're going to work on next. But I was able to come in a few weeks later and say, guys, back to the drawing board. Forget all of this. Forget all the frills. Forget onboarding. We need offline sync. We need to not lose the data that we have. And so that really helped us figure out and focus exactly the direction that we wanted to take it. And so by the time that we got, and of course I'm glossing over the hundreds of hours of grueling work that went behind the scenes and just giving some highlights. But because of that, by the time we started getting traction, we had a fairly polished feature set that was immediately useful and tangible and usable by anyone and everyone. And that traction and that understanding of our trajectory and how we got there was what allowed us to get into 500 startups, which is an accelerator out in Silicon Valley. And there we got to get mentored by a whole network of previous founders and investors that all had their own multi-million-dollar companies or multi-million-dollar exits. And so that kind of helped us kind of get that hockey stick growth and get to the moon. And so I hopefully, we're coming towards the end of my allotted time, but hopefully you're starting to see that all of this was just kind of a combination of shifting my mindset and being willing to try something that I didn't, and being diligent about it and consistent. So if I had to put it in kind of like a framework, it's actually fairly straightforward. This is what I did in order to set myself up to be in a position to start a business and ultimately succeed in that space. So first and foremost is you should always keep learning. Whether it's picking up a new skill like coding, digital marketing, or sales, figure out ways that you can be a value add or an asset, either in your own life or in somebody else's life or organization. Thanks to the internet, there really are no barriers to things like that. And by reading and keeping up with new technologies, that's the only way to kind of stay up with such a fast evolving and fast changing world. Second is avoiding the sunk cost fallacy. Now, this is the linear thinking mindset that I said engineers tend to fall into a lot. We've spent so much time and effort, sleepless nights and everything, trying to get our degree. It seems like a waste if you walk away from it. But that kind of thinking, honestly, is very limiting. One thing that really helped me and was very freeing to my thought process was just being able to say that, hey, sure, I'm learning this right now. Just because I don't use it right away doesn't mean that it's wasted. So the knowledge that you gain is something that will always stay with you. And I can personally attest to this because I left my startup as it was succeeding in order to come back and pursue biomedical engineering, only to promptly not use my degree again and go back into tech. But at my role at Samsung, and I'm not allowed to talk about some of the specifics, it was a venture firm. Some of the projects that we got to work on were specifically because I had a biomedical engineering background. We had some medical devices that they were trying to develop to help bring quality of life to patients that they were working with. And my role was working with one other person, and we redefined product strategy for Samsung headquarters in South Korea. And we would frequently, they would come to us because two people would outperform their entire team of engineers and developers in figuring out which direction to take the product, simply because I just reapplied the same process of validating everything that I did before doing it, right? And so those products and those medical devices, I was allowed to work on them, or we got that project because you never know where your skills might be usable again. Plus, don't tell the business people this, but I honestly think engineers make better business people than business people do. Our whole thing is solving problems, breaking down complex situations into manageable chunks, and thinking in a divergent manner about what you need to do. So the biggest change for me was, especially coming from an Asian background, being able to convince my family that look, just because I'm not becoming a doctor or an engineer, it doesn't mean that I'm failing somehow or I'm wasting my life. And so I would urge everyone to kind of adopt that kind of mindset. The third thing is to practice a constant improvement outlook. So this would be to cultivate a thought process of thinking about how to innovate or improve upon everything around you. So my roommate and I used to do this, especially when we were in innovation class. Every day we would sit down from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. and brainstorm ideas. So like taking time to brainstorm ideas is another thing, but we would attack each other's ideas, try to figure out how to do something better. And throughout your day, you just try to develop a subconscious mindset of, if I'm holding a can opener, is there any way I can improve it? If I see somebody using a cool gadget, is there a way to improve that? And so those kinds of things help flex your creativity muscle. And I would say it is a muscle like everything else. You have to use it in order to be primed and ready to go when an opportunity does present itself. And then last but not least, if you do come up with an idea, which are a dime a dozen, what's important is to actually put that into like how you actually deploy that. And so to minimize your risk of failing, it's you form easily testable hypotheses as you would as an engineer or a scientist to validate your idea. So this would include things such as problem validation, product validation, solution validation, and customer development. And so really quickly, I just wanted to give a little bit of insight into what customer development and product validation, or like the lean validation process, is. And all of these things and terms that I'm using, if you just Google them, you'll find books and books about all of this. So customer development kind of allows you to remove the guesswork of building products, and it helps determine if your idea is truly unique, solves a problem, if customers would pay and how much that would be, which features are needed in an MVP, and how to acquire customers and scale. And all of this without spending a lot of money, which we did by talking to hundreds of bars and restaurants, asking non-leading questions. And then me going and validating the use case of the product by putting myself in the customer's shoes. Now, you don't have to go as overboard as I did, but the same concept applies, and you can easily do it while still having a 9-to-5 job. And if that gives you the kind of flexibility to move in and out and go in the direction that you want. And so this is an image from Steve Blank's customer development model. It's a book that you should absolutely check out. You can look through customer discovery, validation, customer creation, and company building, and what things need to happen in every single stage. And last but not least, here's the lean validation process. So first, you need to validate the problem. Is it worth solving? Right? Then you need to validate the market. So does the market agree that this is a problem worth solving, or is it just a few people? Then you validate the problem. The problem might exist, but does your product actually solve it? And last but not least, you validate the willingness to pay. And so how much would people actually reach into their pocket? And if you get answered yes for all of that, you're free to pivot if you see a bigger use case, or you can then start actually building the product out. And this works for medical devices, or it works for software, like what I focus in. But there's so many resources out there. Hopefully, this gives you an understanding of how easy it is to actually get started down that path. And my last point is just that this isn't like right now I'm working on a coronavirus related thing, and I'll be happy to answer questions regarding that. But in between that, you don't hear anything about what I've done, but I've actually tried to start multiple businesses, painting business, financial services business, briefly dallied with a biomedical engineering idea, so on and so forth. But these don't even show up in our talks or in regular conversation because I either didn't pursue them, it wasn't something that I was super passionate about, or they just plain didn't work. But the concept, the idea is that you have to keep going and not ever really stop innovating and trying. And so with that, I'll end and open up the floor to any questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, that was really great. There's questions pouring in. I will try to ask some in order, but please post your questions either in the chat or in the questions and answers, and I will pose them to Ishan. So first off, We have a question. How would you advise a current BME student who is interested in starting a company upon graduation or even before?
Sure. So that's a great question. Obviously, I don't know the exact specifics of what you're specializing in, what your idea is, or like what field that's in. So I'll try to give as general advice as possible. First and foremost, again, applying this framework, I would say the earlier you start, the better. College is a great time, whether you're in grad school or undergrad, to really try things, because it's one of the few times in life that you're not going to really be bogged down with necessarily a 9 to 5 or having to work 40+ hour weeks in order to vet an idea and kind of squeeze things in outside of meetings. So there's a lot that you can do before you put pen to paper in terms of code or actually building something out. The whole thing is, how much can you actually vet in terms of knowing exactly who your customers are, how much they're willing to pay, where your product market fit might be, what features you might need in order to have a successful product. What is your marketing strategy? Like, how would you gain traction? There's 19 marketing channels, for example, from billboards to Facebook ads and things like that. So you can look up a book called Traction. And similar to what I just was saying about making easily testable hypotheses, each of these things can be broken down into hypotheses. You make a list of, okay, if I'm trying to start, for example, giving my own example of bartender, we're trying to start an inventory solution. So who are the people that might be using it? Bar owners, bar managers, bar backs, bartenders. These are the likely stakeholders, quote unquote. And so what hypotheses all have to be true in order for this to be useful to them, right? So, like, I hypothesize that inventory is important for a bar owner in order to turn a profit. And you literally list out every single hypothesis that has to be true, that you have to do inventory in order to know what's going on. And if a lot of those are proved wrong, that no, you actually don't need to, then you immediately know that this idea probably doesn't work the way that you're envisioning. And so the whole thing is that hopefully you're noticing everything that I'm talking about. None of that requires you to actually build anything out, right? You can have a very good idea of exactly what you need to build out. It might not end up working out, but too often I see people having an idea and then they get wrapped up in it, really hyped up about it. They start building it. And then when they finally release it, they realize they're not solving the use case, right? And many times we've had to pivot, right? So we started with just inventorying alcohol. And so what happened to us when we were in our accelerator was we actually had, I was managing the whole database of just all the images that people could take if we didn't have their bottle. We had a functionality where you could take a picture of the bottle and we'd go through and make it look better and things. And all of a sudden I started seeing forks, knives, salmon fillets, and some dispensaries started using it to inventory weed. And so Starbucks started using it at a couple of places to try to inventory their back end. And so we realized that people actually wanted to use this outside of what our use case had been, right? And so immediately I just went back to step one and started calling up every single person that sent in food pictures. Hey, how'd you get this idea? What did you do? Why does this matter to you? And once we built out a use case that, yeah, it seems that food is actually a thing that we can do as well, then it made sense and it minimized the risk of us doing that. We had that idea when we started out a business, but if we had done that from the get-go, we would have spent money that we didn't have and time that we didn't have in order to do something that may or may not have worked. So first, I know I was rambling a bit, but hopefully that gives you an understanding of, first you need to just figure out what the pain points are that you're trying to solve, right? And whether you're improving an efficiency somewhere or doing something that's completely paradigm shifting, and figure out who's actually going to benefit from this, how they're going to benefit from this, what assumptions you're making, and then go and getting all those answered, right? And all the product validation, customer validation stuff that I said, if you just enter that into Google, you'll have more information than you know what to do with. And that way you can minimize your risk of actually failing and knowing what you're doing by the time you start a business. Hopefully that was.
Great. What motivates you to keep innovating and trying different things?
Oh, I mean, I don't know if it's ADD or what, but I don't know. I've just been fortunate that I've always been surrounded by people that just really love to learn. And I always had a genuine interest in figuring out how the world around me works. And so it's just very, there's so much knowledge out there and there's so much cool stuff that can be done and so much to learn about that if you just kind of cultivate that mindset of learning for the sake of learning, like not necessarily wanting something out of it right away, it helps you kind of discover what you're passionate about. And I like coming into something and making it better when I left, or figuring out a cool new way of doing something. And sometimes that creativity comes from, like, if you're into art or if you're into music and you make your own or play instruments, like that kind of carries over to the creative side when starting a business. But yeah, the motivation is just that you like learning, you like trying new things. And I never like being bogged down in one thing, right? And now, thankfully, I'm in a place where right now I'm running a company on the side and I'm doing a 9 to 5 job, but I don't feel stuck. Like, I don't feel like now that I'm doing an engineering thing or a tech thing, this is the only thing that I'll ever be able to do. So that kind of keeps me motivated, just that freedom, or like the idea of being able to pursue whatever I wanted.
Okay, we have a funding question. What indicators cause you to want to seek VC money versus allowing natural growth?
Sure. Yeah, so that's a great question. Obviously, we were all broke college kids, so our ability to fund our startup was zero. So we bootstrapped to profitability. But of course, once you have product market fit and you're actually getting customers signing up, it's a conversation that's ongoing and it's different from company to company. I've seen some very successful companies that haven't needed VC money. For us, it was just a decision that made sense at the time. By getting VC money, not only do you get exposure, but it's important to understand that you're not getting VC money just for the sake of having money. This is, as a startup founder, if you have a startup worth of salt that's good, you will have people, like, you understand that you have a profitable and valuable business or solution. And so VCs, it becomes much more of a conversation of what can they do for you other than giving money. Because and when it comes to money, anybody can give money. There's a lot of money floating around and a lot of people that have more money than they know what to do with. So the important thing is figuring out what is a smart money ad, right? So this VC, for example, is friends with the 500 biggest bars in the country, right? Or like the biggest chains. Or he personally knows the CEO of American Airlines. Something like that, where it's a value add to your business, or they have taken similar products to market and they've exited a $100 million company and they can be a mentor. These are things that you consider. And them putting in money gives them a stake, like skin in the game, for you to succeed, right? And it gives you the resources to hire out a development team. Like, we bootstrapped to profitability again, like I said, but I was wearing half the hats in the company, right? I was doing product and design, and I'm terrible at design compared to product. And I was doing marketing, and I was doing sales calls, and I was doing webinars, and I was doing support, and I was, like, going out and talking to customers. And so we were working in very unsustainable ways, which we didn't really foresee going into it, because you're just in the moment. And we were young and reckless, like early 20s, like 20, 21, when we started this company. And so we were working 100-hour plus weeks every week for like 3+ years. So that's part of the reason I decided to leave. It was actually because I got hit by a drunk driver a few years ago, like before I started my master's program. And I was in Florida at the time, and I healed back just fine, but I couldn't walk for a little while because I had a broken foot. And so during that time, the 3-4 months that I was healing up, I was at home here in Florida, and the team was out in San Francisco, like / California, and traveling around. And during that time, I was just focused on healing back, and I got a lot of time to think then. And I realized, hey, I'm kind of burnt out with how I did this. Looking back, I would have definitely had more of a work-life balance, which I'm managing to have now with my new startup, right? I have, even though I'm working on it, in addition to everything that I'm doing, and like, I still have time to pursue my hobbies, still have time to do everything. It's more about, I realize, more about goal setting and just tracking milestones than it is to just be working every single moment that you're awake. But I just felt that, for myself, I had to walk away. And so that was a decision that I made on amicable terms with the team. And that's why I ended up leaving. But yeah, so how you choose to fund your company is entirely up to you. One thing that I will say is don't be stingy with equity. I've seen too many people kind of lose friendships and stunt their own growth, company's growth, because they want to hold on to every 0.1%, 0.001%. What you need to realize is like 0.1% of $1 billion is a hell of a lot more than 10% of $100. So I hope those numbers are right. But hopefully that tells you you have to do what's best for your company, and if the pie's bigger, everybody gets a bigger piece. So that was the decision for us.
Okay, I think I understand this question, but we may have to get. You tell me if you need clarity. Sure. What are your thoughts on pitch events for younger people that have not graduated and have limited money, networking capacity?
Great question. Great question. Yes. Just yes to the whole thing. That's exactly what we did when we started out. We had zero money. We had to come up with terms of service. We had to come up with an end user license agreement. We had some, like with a company, from filing things, we have a patent that just got awarded, I think last year. So we had to file all of that. So we bought a book on patent law, and we'd stay up till like 4 or 5 in the morning trying to draft up legalese ourselves. And we would go to pitch competitions, because a lot of these pitch competitions are a way to get word out and get a buzz, at least locally in your community, about what you're working on and networking with people. And so as a first-time founder or somebody that's like not born into like a very, very well-connected family, those are the growing pains that you have to go through. You have to figure out how to form a network. And pitching competitions are a great way to get that started, because it gives you visibility. People see what you're working on, and if they like what you're doing, or when you're networking, you can ask them like, hey, where do I go to get this? And a lot of times the prize for pitch competitions was a couple $1,000s worth of free legal consultation. And so we tell our CEO, who incidentally was the guy that was smitten with the bartender girl, and they were actually our first client, and so she would use our product every day, never knowing that it was all because of her. So that was just kind of a funny aside. But he was the CEO, and I'd tell him, dude, you better win this competition, because we had like our deadlines approaching to submit our forms. And so that's literally how we did it in the beginning. So as a startup founder, especially without money, yes, I can definitely empathize, but there are many things that you can do. There are many people that you can talk to and get as close as possible. You might not necessarily always get over the finish line, but people tend to like seeing people really trying something with all their heart. And so when you kind of make that apparent, you'll find help in like surprising places to help you get across the finish line.
Okay, you've mentioned quite a few different books already, but there was a question about what other books do you recommend reading for people who are interested in starting a business?
Sure. So I kind of surprised myself by recommending books, because I actually don't read that many of them myself. But there are some good ones, like whose frameworks I've used. So look up, I believe the book is called Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Then there's Traction. That's the single word. And well, what that really focuses on is that it breaks down those 19 different marketing channels and puts forth the idea that there's probably actually just 1 or 2 channels that work for your company. And so it's your job to quickly figure out which channel or channels those are. And usually the second channel is just a funnel into the main channel. And how you can kind of put together these very quick and dirty tests without spending much money. So one thing that we did, for example, was in Samsung, we would pretend that the product was our own product. Like we were a startup, even though it was like undercover, like secret Samsung headquarters product. And we would put like $5 a day ads on Facebook, seeing how much conversion we got. We tried it on different mediums, seeing if word of mouth was better, and like talking to people, customer development. So like that book's really good too. And then the third one was customer development. That was the one that I was talking about in my presentation. So customer development is a fantastic one, and it really goes through how to talk to customers. And then I'm blanking on the name as a fourth book, but there's a book, and I think it has mom in the title, but it's basically like talking about how to ask non-leading questions. So if you just look up startup book for asking non-leading questions, there's a book that's kind of about, you have to differentiate whether you're explaining your startup to your mom or a potential customer, because your mom's always going to be in your corner. And that's kind of the logic behind it, that you have to separate that out and figure out if you're managing to keep it as a customer or you're turning them into your mom. So those are the 4 that I would recommend off the top of my head.
So I have a question personally.
Sure.
I was curious, you talked a lot about the alpha testing of the alpha product. I mean, you were basically, and you said that was a couple of years even. So
No, I said I lost a couple of years of my life.
Oh, you lost a couple of years, okay.
Yeah, I did that for like maybe 2 months.
Oh, just 2 months.
Yeah.
I was mostly curious how you lived. What?
Yeah, no. So a lot of it was sleeping on the floor. We were pretty broke, and so it was always very strange because by getting through the accelerator and the program, you had like a $4, $5, $6 million valuation for your company when you exited. But that didn't really translate over to our bank accounts, right? We'd be partying with like multimillionaire investors, and they'd like take us bar hopping in like all the bars that they owned or something, or they would get the best of the best, and we're like, oh yay, and we would just pig out on hors d'oeuvres because back home all I had was tortilla chips, right? And so, yeah, we had 6 people to a 2-room house with 1 bathroom, and I slept on the floor for like a year almost because I couldn't afford a mattress. And so obviously what I'm saying is that we kind of dove headfirst into the company. But looking back, there's much smarter ways to go about it. But we were at the age where it was okay for us to be that levels of dumb. But you can very easily, like I'm doing right now with my current company, and it's very early stage, but it's starting to get wings, is that we just set goals, right? You know, I'm busy from this time to this time. We know we make plans for what we're going to try to achieve. Everybody has their work delineated, like the developers are building out this like alpha version that we're going to test out in Gainesville actually in a few weeks. It's focused right now on the education side of things, just helping teachers and parents connect with each other and giving them an alternative to actually having to put their kids back in school. So especially with this coronavirus stuff going around. So we're just trying to work fast and we get a lot of work done, but by learning how to step away and not micromanage everything yourself and just setting goals and trusting each other to follow through and keeping communication lines open. I'm working my 9 to 5 and I'm doing my startup thing, and I don't even feel like I'm stressing out, right? Because it's very possible to be much more efficient with that. So I would advise doing that. And if your startup starts making more money than you make in your job, where it's like taking so much of your time now because it's making more, that's when you can have that conversation. So I always urge people to keep that work-life balance. Stay off social media. It's a dumpster fire, and don't buy into the Silicon Valley hype machine where they're just like, yeah, you got to be living and breathing. Listen, you can become very successful without having to literally upend your life, because if you make it but you've destroyed your health and your relationships and everything, there's nobody left to enjoy what you made. So just take it easy and find a balance. But it's definitely possible to do both. And thanks to the internet, you can always, like, I focus on on software related stuff and selling to businesses. Why? Because businesses have more money generally than people. And then software, because you don't need to go through the FDA, you don't have to do all that stuff. But in my new startup, who knows? At one point, I might have to. But that's a bridge I'll cross when I get to it.
That kind of dovetails a little bit. There was a question about general life advice for a 20-year-old.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, that actually worked out pretty well. So I would definitely say, one, don't be too hard on yourself. I know there's a tendency for a lot of people to do that all the time. And that's something that I still struggle with. So I'm not like speaking from the mount or anything like that. I recognize that it's important to figure out the things that make you happy, right? Like, and not necessarily like just money or something, but whether it's learning or which aspect of learning, which fields, or what skills that you'd like to have. Like one of the skills that's next on my list is picking up digital marketing. I think there's a lot of businesses that need to turn digital, but they don't know how to do it because they're like a painting business and they've been doing face-to-face for 40 years. So there's probably like a revenue stream in there somewhere. So figure out what you want to do. Always just keep trying new things and try to figure out, can I do this without really spending any of my own money, right? If it's a time question, but you're going to gain a life skill by putting in that time, I'd invite you to think that it is worth it to kind of put that in. Like if it's something that interests you, and you think that you'll be better off for having learned that, it's something that you have to learn once. So go for it. And then the other thing is put yourself out of your comfort zone. Too often it's easy for us to just, and right now it's easier said than done with everything that's going on in the world. But before it was normally like, I'm just going to watch some Netflix. It's the end of the day, right? Or I'm just going to play video games. Nothing wrong with doing any of those things. But you have to put yourself in situations that kind of make you a little uncomfortable, like push you outside your comfort zone a little bit. So for example, right now, there's startup hackathons still going on, even though everybody's social distancing. All that happened was now they're online, right? And so I've seen dozens of them being spring up organically within communities, run by Facebook, run by European institutions. There's so much stuff that's still going on. You just have to actually go out and find it. If you don't have a network, figure out how to make a network, right? Whether it's like going into music, like which is something that I've always liked doing. So working on music, networking with people like that. I'm in Facebook groups. I help people out. Another thing is learn to just make the room that you're in better. And by that, I mean, be somebody that's always helping, right? Like always be somebody that helps. And that's something that really helped me out. I never really expected anything in return, but if I saw somebody that I thought was pretty cool, we became friends, and they were working on a company, I would go out of my way to help them out, right? Whether they gave me equity or not, past a certain point, of course, you should have these conversations, right? If it's something that you do want to pursue in that sense. But if it's just like, oh, I need somebody to help me with an event. I need somebody to hold lights for me for this like little short that I'm filming. I always went out and did that. And because of that, you just meet such a mishmash of people that are out there doing interesting and cool things. And it gives you this kind of, you learn very quickly that degrees and everything aside from certain jobs really don't mean much, right? Like unless you want to become a doctor or like a professional engineer signing off on like, plant design or something, you don't really need a lot of degrees, especially in these like software or creative fields. Some of the best coders in Google are high school dropouts, right? But they just figured out that everybody on the other end is human, right? At the end of the day, they want a connection with you. And so if you show up as a biomedical engineer or like another type of engineer, but you've built out a portfolio where you taught yourself coding and built out like this 10, 20, 30 projects of, increasing complexity, you'll absolutely get interviews for jobs because they just want good developers. They want good coders. They want good data scientists. And you can get into startups in the same way. If you want to go into sales or something, it's very easy to just do some sales on behalf of the startup, right? Find 4 or 5 people that are interested, learn about the startup, find 4 or 5 people that are interested in purchasing, message the CEO. Instead of being like, I want to work here, just be like, hey, love your startup. I love everything that you guys do. In fact, I've been evangelizing it on your behalf and I have 5 people that are interested in purchasing your product. When can we talk? I guarantee you that'll give you much higher rates of return, right? And so these are things that are not anything outside the norm, but it's something that people don't think about. And so just to like give one final point, one of my co-founders that I used to, for a bartender, he used to be like a model back in college and stuff. And he told me 2 or 3, like maybe 4 months ago that he wanted to get into acting. It's something that he had always had a passion for. He's still there, a bartender. And so I got pretty excited. I was like, yeah, we'll come up with skits. I'll help you record your stuff, like similar to those things. Like I want to help my friends succeed. But he applied that kind of startup, like hustle mentality, which is what I was saying, like be a value add to people. He went to a film festival, networked with each and every person that he came across. And they're like, yeah, I need somebody like as a stagehand. I need to do this. Like, I'll do it. I'll help out. I'll do it. I never expected anything back. But because of that, within a few months, like literally 3 or 4 months, he already booked 3 movie roles, and not small ones. Like I don't know if I can give the titles out, but literally like AAA titles. Obviously not any of the main parts, but I will say he worked with The Rock and Ryan Reynolds in one of his movies. He's in a Netflix feature film, and it's always been like, you know, the trope has always been like the quintessential struggling actor takes a lifetime to get a break or something. And I asked him like, what's the difference? And he's like, no, it just comes down to having that, like not having that sunk cost fallacy mindset and trying to keep an open mind and just figuring out how you can make your situation work for you. It's like, I don't have experience, but I'm willing to work, right? And so figuring that out is probably going to be what gets you the farthest. Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, that was perfect. One more good question. What are the most translatable experiences you had with Bartender to potential biomedical endeavors?
Oh, interesting. Okay. So, yeah, translatable experience is an interesting one. Obviously, because we were in a startup, it's kind of like standing under a waterfall in terms of all the things that you're experiencing. It's a deluge, to be quite frank. But a lot of it is just being able to perform under pressure, under tight deadlines, those kinds of things. And whether your startup is successful or not, these are things that you can learn just by the fact that you tried. And so you should not think about startups as like success or failure, but more in terms of what you learned and got out of it. Because each startup that I tried that didn't work, I learned about another field, I learned about other stuff, or like disciplines or ways about thinking about things that I might not have otherwise. And so it's the most important thing is to just try it, minimize the out-of-pocket expense, ideally use other people's money to fund your stuff. So like that's another reason to get VC funding. But the translatable experiences are that being able to work on with like many different work streams at the same time. And it's really nice in that sense because any corporate job that I take, I've only had 2 so far, everything feels so structured and like almost boringly easy. Like the people are amazing, they're very smart, but I never feel stressed. I never feel anxiety about it because it pales in comparison to like we're trying to keep the circus tent together and everything's on fire, right? And so compared to that, oh, I have to attend 10 meetings today, that's a layup, you know? So it becomes much more manageable. You get a pretty laid back outlook on life because you get to meet people that are like always doing cool things that inspire you and motivate you. People management is another thing. You gain years of experience in months by doing something that requires you to wear all hats, right? And so in my conversations in product management, stuff became easy because as a product manager, you sit across the entirety of the organization. I work with all the developers and talk very technical things about like the architecture, how does the Hadoop cluster work with the data lake that we have, blah, blah, blah. And then we turn around and we have to talk to the marketing department or the language department. Here's what we're trying to do. And then we have to work with the sales team that, okay, as sales, this is your cut, this is how we work. But because I personally had to do that in our startup because there was nobody else, everybody was doing it, you had to. I actually have hands-on experience with all that stuff, which immeasurably helps in being able to see eye to eye with other departments. It makes them understand and respect where you're coming from. You can be cognizant of exactly why they might be saying what they're saying. And so that really diminishes like, you know, workplace hostility and things because it's not, you're no longer looking at things with just like, these are my OKRs or these are the metrics I have to hit, right? And as long as I get that, everyone else be damned. You can actually empathize and see where people are coming from, why they might be hesitant to do something. And that really gives you like an edge in being able to communicate with leadership and understanding a holistic picture of the business that makes you an asset no matter what. Because you can have an amazing coder, but a coder that also understands how this fits into the business, how you might monetize on that, make money off of this, and defines architecture and stuff in a scalable way to that end is much more valuable than someone that can just code what you tell them to. So those are probably the biggest translatable things: talking to people, presenting, flying around, and trying to keep a schedule when there is no schedule. The list goes on and on. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it to everyone because it's such a good learning experience.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question. what are some specific BME skills that you use in your role today?
Oh, okay. So specific BME skills, currently for my projects, not much. My projects are more in like the telecom space. So I work at Verizon Media, which is like a big data analytics. Like I'm in the BDAI side, and so we have tons of data. I think we process something like 4 trillion events a day, and so being able to, so I guess like the BME skill would be like just analytics, like being able to handle data and stuff. So it kind of reminds me a lot of like the tuning that we did for finding spike timing and things like that. We just have such a huge amount of data that we have to really know exactly what we want, why we want it, and being able to take those kind of complex problems where you just have this kind of almost garbage sets of data and being able to turn that into something that's actually usable and seeing how we can actually derive value from it or find something interesting or find, like the events that we're actually looking for to see an uptick in, customer behavior or things like that, or our enterprise insights. Biomedical engineering has been hugely helpful in that kind of regard. And plus, because we're so resource constrained, even in a company like Verizon, so like to give you an idea, we have maybe 5 or 6 product managers in my department, but we're handling something close to 40 projects. And that's usually not the case. A lot of companies only have a couple per product manager. And so being able to quickly look at something and get up to speed and being able to break that down into actionable chunks and hypotheses and making sure that we know what we're doing before we're building that out. I don't think I would have been able to do that if I didn't have a major that data was not easy to come by. Like it's not like something like finance and stuff has its own set of challenges, but you have a lot of data. The biomedical engineering and chemical engineering, you are very constrained about what data you can actually use. And so you have to make the most of what you have available. So that's probably the most directly translatable thing.
I think generally a lot of people are looking at a lot of data right now through COVID, and I really appreciate the fact that it's a good idea to know how to look at data and make good conclusions.
Yep.
So that is all the questions we have, and it actually corresponds to basically as much time as we had. So I'd like everyone to thank Mr. Kulkarni. I don't have a reaction button. I can't clap. Maybe they do, but this was great. There's lots of thank yous coming in on the chat and the questions and answers. Thank you very much. We'll can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks everyone for all your questions.
I'm always just really floored by your motivation, your optimism, and your enthusiasm. So
thank you. I'll definitely keep you updated on the new stuff that we're working on. I'll connect with you offline about that.
We're always here to listen. So
thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you so much. Take care, everyone.